I am Victoria, and I head up an organisation called 10 Space. And at 10 Space, we are specialists in employee feedback, employee surveys, and that kind of wrap around employee experience and employee engagement that goes along with that. So the work that we're often doing is helping organisations to capture employee feedback, employee sentiment, and really understand what's going on in their organisation at that point in time, and use that to build engagement, build culture, transform employee experiences. And often when I'm talking to clients and we're understanding, you know, what do we need to be finding out in your organisation at the moment, there's a lot of change that goes on in an organisation. There's always something with a team or the whole organisation where some kind of change has happened, and we're helping organisations to navigate that change. And we do that with data and employee feedback, and helping organisations to kind of navigate change more quickly. So one of the what we're going to talk about on the call today is we're going to talk about those different types of organisational change. We're going to talk about why change impacts so heavily on employee engagement. And we're going to talk about some ways that we can speed up going through that change curve, and we can help employees to navigate change more effectively and make sure that the impact that change has on employee engagement, that we're rebuilding that as quickly as we possibly can. And it's really normal and natural for change processes, big or small, to impact on engagement. And the trick is, when it comes to kind of rebuilding engagement and making sure that we've got highly engaged teams, is staying ahead of that, making sure that we're really tuned into those employees and that we can help and support them and be proactive when we're navigating change. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, different types of organisational change. I was a HR professional in my career, and I think any HR people that are on the call will know that a huge part of your role is about helping implement change and navigating change, and helping employees to navigate change. Whether that's huge, really big things like restructures, downsizing. I worked for one organisation where we were perpetually restructuring as a HR business partner, and that was just the key part of my role, was delivering restructures and that change programme that goes along with it. Another role that I did was mergers and acquisitions. I headed up a mergers and acquisitions function, and you can imagine the kind of the change impact of taking two organisations and crashing them together, and the impact that has on employees. Oftentimes what we're talking about when we're talking about kind of change and the impact on individuals, what's actually going on for the employee is, if you think about, picture yourself kind of driving to work as an employee, and you walk through the door, you know exactly where you're going to sit, you know who your teams are, you know the work that you're going to do that day, you know who your line manager is. And often that change is when we have shifted something that the employee didn't ask for, and we have kind of shifted and changed their feeling and their part of the world, if you like. So, you know, like I say, it's restructures, it's acquisitions, it's relocating. That can be really tough change, is where we're moving employees from one location to the next. Similar to acquisitions and mergers, maybe you've had a big injection of cash into your organisation, you've got some new investors, they've got different expectations about what that feels like, they've got different processes, they've got different expectations about what's going to happen in that organisation. Cultural change, you know, if you are working currently in a role where you are looking to transform culture, taking culture from toxic to good or good to great, whatever that looks like, that can be a massive change programme. Leadership change, I'm sure that everybody sat on this call has experienced the feeling of having a new line manager, and what that feels like to get kind of used to a new line manager, understand their expectations, what is it that you're looking for, what is it that they're looking for as a new leader. Contractual change, I'll use this example a little bit as we go through. So There was a change program that I often think about that I did. It wasn't a change program, it was a small change that we did, and there was a group of employees in one particular site, and we wanted to move their car park about, I don't know, 500 feet to the right, and we were moving them from where they parked in the morning from one car park to the next. Still had car parking, but what we'd done there was that we had done a kind of change to their psychological contract, so how they felt about driving into work in the morning. So them sat in the car, they were all of a sudden going left and not right, or right or not left, and that had really shifted and changed something for those employees. I cannot tell you the letters and the grievances, and even though they weren't unionised, they were threatening to strike, etc. And that was a real tough piece of change that those employees weren't expecting, and that we had to navigate them through. And I'll kind of talk about why that was probably so tough for that group of people in a moment. Strategy change, if you're taking, if you were a sales organisation, you're now going to be an innovative organisation, you've introduced a new product, you've opened up a new division. Strategy changes can be huge as well. Technology changes, we see this. I can always see in an employee feedback survey if there is a new piece of technology that has been introduced recently into an organisation, and I can see it because employees are either being really positive about it or really negative about it. There's usually nothing in between. Sometimes just adding in a new expenses platform, for example, doesn't feel like an enormous change in an organisation, but really can shift and change things a lot for employees. And it does seem to be technology change really does impact on employees and how they feel about their place in the world and that organisation. And then, of course, there's always external change. These pandemics or these cost of living crises or these, whatever that is, policy changes that really impact on organisations. So the key part that we really need to understand when it comes to changes, that we have what we're going through when we're taking employees through changes, we're really shifting and changing how they feel about the organisation and their place in the world. And so the work that we can do to get people engaged and make sure that we understand engagement throughout that is helping them to navigate that change. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, just as my slides aren't moving on, forgive me. Okay, right. So here's an analogy that I talk about when I talk about employee engagement and change. So employee engagement is, I often think of it as like a bank account. And when we're doing employee surveys, actually, and when we're capturing data about employee engagements, we can kind of measure how much engagement is in an organisation's bank account, a team's bank account. And when we're trying to build engagement up, when we're kind of trying to make gains when it comes to employee engagement and that feeling of happiness in a team or in an organisation, what we're trying to do is put more into the bank than we're taking back out. And we'll put things into the bank like, all the great stuff that we do around great onboarding processes and, great terms and conditions, or great leadership and coaching, etc. And we're making deposits into the bank account and we're building engagement as we go through. But when we go through like a change process, what we're doing is we're making withdrawals from that bank account. We're taking huge amounts of withdrawals out of the bank account, and where we see challenges coming from disengagement when we go through change is when we've taken out more than we've put in. So if you think about that car parking analogy that I just used, now that I reflect on it, now that I know what I know, at the time as a kind of HR business partner, what I hadn't appreciated was that team had already been through huge amounts of change. They had been through a change of leadership that they really didn't enjoy. They really didn't enjoy their new leader. And what we were then going in and doing was changing something else. So we'd already made this huge withdrawal out of the bank account and we were about to do more. And that's why we saw the grievances, we saw the turnover, etc. in employees, because we didn't have enough in the bank in order to successfully navigate that through that change without consequences. And some of you might be feeling this on the call, you know, if you have seen engagement drop, or you have started to get some turnover or sickness, or some drop in performance in teams that are going through change, you'll have seen this happening. And this is my theory about this is my kind of view on my analogy on why that's happening, because you need to be putting more into the bank account than you're taking back out. And so the work that we do when we go through change management, when it comes to employee engagement, is really about making sure that we are, whatever we're taking out, we're putting that back in, and we're rebuilding engagement as we go through. And that's the key. So this change curve, I'm sure you will all have seen change curves in the past, and this is here to demonstrate that really naturally engagement will drop during a period of change, and then our work then is to rebuild it out the other side. And if we're proactive about doing that, we can really speed up the time it takes for employees to go through a change curve and to come out the other side either rebuild or an even higher engagement than when we started. But if we're not proactive about it, then that's when we can find that change really kind of drags on, and that engagement can be really impacted for a large period of time. So this kind of engagement, some of the comments that we put on this is an example of some of the stuff that I saw when I was going through acquisitions, for example. So, you know, I would go into an organisation and I would, the teams weren't expecting it, would be there on site 9 o'clock in the morning to announce to them that they'd just been acquired. And the shock and the surprise, and, you know, immediately you could see in people's faces that some people were confused or angry, cross, disengaged. Some people were excited about it, they'd seen the opportunities in it. But a lot of the time it was, you know, it was quite a challenging change process to take people through. And you would see things like, you know, this new business doesn't know what they're doing. They aren't even listening to us. They're being disrespectful, you know, and really going into kind of like, I can't be bothered anymore. I'm taking my foot off the gas. I'm not interested. Nobody's noticing me anyway. And the work that I would then do is around employee engagement, helping people navigate this change process and come out the other side and rebuilding that engagement, so that we start to see things like, oh, you know what, I've had an idea, I'm getting a bit more engaged, I'm going to try something out, until people are absolutely flying again. And this change curve is absolutely natural. You know, you'll see this in a restructure, you'll see this in a contractual change, you'll see it when you know, when we're changing car parking for people. No matter that big or small change, we have shifted and changed something in the way that that employee sees the world, and our role as change makers is to help them navigate out the other side of that. And a lot of the time, like I say, what we're doing, how Tenspace help organisations to do this is with data and feedback, and to understand what's going on in teams and organisations. So there will be other metrics and signals when you are going through change, or you particularly if people have become disengaged out of the back of a change. You might see some additional turnover. You might see performance dropping. You might see sickness increasing, for example. So there's metrics that we can have a look at. But a lot of the time with the organisations that we're working with, we're surveying employees to get that regular flow of data and feedback into the organisation, so that the leaders and the people who are driving through change or working on engagement in that organisation can understand exactly what it is that's going on in that team. And we can capture data, we can capture employee feedback in order to do that. And you know, this isn't annual engagement surveys, because I don't know a single organisation that only changes once a year. This is regular. A lot of our clients, for example, are doing this quarterly, writing out to employees, understand what is it that's going on, you know, how and what's the engagement like in each of their teams and across the entire organisation. And that gives us great data points and great feedback. So thinking then about some of the things that we've seen that really help to drive change through quickly and more quickly, and that's stuff that I mentioned about being more proactive when it comes to change. So One of the things that I've kind of already talked about is that kind of changing how an employee feels about their part in the world and their place in the world. And what we've done there is we've unsettled their psychological safety. So they were safe because they were in their routine and they knew exactly what was happening in the organisation. And then something's happened to them, piece of change, and we've disrupted that safety. So we can be really proactive with going and rebuilding that, and we can measure things and check in with things like with leaders with verbal feedback, or whether it's written feedback or feedback during anonymous employee feedback surveys, where we can go and measure trust with asking the right questions, and we can measure whether people feel safe and secure in their roles if we've just been through a restructure, for example. But it's really important, whatever that looks like, that we accept that when we're going through change, we've disrupted somebody's psychological safety, and there is a process and a proactive process that we need to go through in order to rebuild that safety and rebuild that trust between individuals and leaders, but also an employee's trust with that organisation and how safe and secure they feel in that organisation. So I would encourage you to kind of be thinking about psychological safety. What have we shifted for employees, and what have we disrupted, and what's the impact of that, and how can we work to rebuild that trust and that psychological safety back in employees? A lot of the time that can be about being transparent, being supportive, keeping them informed, making sure that you're listening to them as you go through that transition period. Checking in with leaders. We've seen a bit of a trend recently across all of our engagement surveys that we run, where leaders are these kind of layers within the organisation that are appearing, people leaders, to be less engaged. And this is really critical. Like, we need our leaders to be engaged. So as we're going through change, I always started with the leaders, and I use them as change agents to make sure that that they were able to drive through the change themselves with their teams, but also to kind of supercharge and cascade down that kind of engagement. And your leaders are so key to doing this. And whenever I was going through big change, when I was doing acquisitions, for example, I would always kind of hive off the leaders and make sure that I was really confident that they were informed, they felt confident, that they had everything that they needed in order to be those change makers within the organisation, and that they felt that they were able to drive through change with their teams. Sometimes I've done learning and development programs to help leaders navigate change if we felt that there was a gap in skill set. But if you are doing surveys, or if you've got a way of taking a temperature check of your leaders, really make sure that those leaders are engaged first and foremost, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to scale it across the organisation and build change across their own teams and across the wider organisation. So, whilst we might be doing organisational change, really make sure that you're hiving off those leaders, making sure that they're engaged and you're treating them as change agents. We see this a lot again in engagement surveys, where something's shifted, the strategy changed, leadership's changed, and employees have drifted away from that understanding about the story and the direction of travel of the organisation. So it's really important that we're connecting those people back in. This is such a key element of engagement, is that the employees know the direction of travel, they know the story of the organisation, they know where we're heading, and what that means for them. So again, we can measure this, for example, in an engagement survey. We can ask some questions like, do you understand the goals of the organisation and how you can contribute? And this really is about making sure that everybody's crystal clear on their part of the world and the contribution that they can make, and whatever's shifted around them, how that shifts and changes their goals and their part in the world, and making sure that we're really taking the opportunity to reconnect with things like vision, mission, values, goals, and that we're taking the time to kind of paint that new picture if we need to, if something's fundamentally shifted. And that can really make an impact on change adoption. Rebuilding teams. So again, if you are really tapped into engagement and how engagement is kind of tracking and changing in your organisation, you might be able to see in the data and the feedback that you're getting where there's particular teams that might need some more support when they're building as they go through the change. So, you know, for example, if the finance team have taken a particular hit, maybe you crash two teams together, they've got a new piece of technology, new ways of working, whatever that looks like, really making sure that you are identifying where those particular teams are that might need some additional support, of forming again, bringing them together, addressing a drop in performance, etc. And really kind of, if you've got it, using the data in order to understand where you might need to focus next, who might need additional support or training, who might need some additional communication, to really make sure that on a team by team basis, you are supercharging everybody in that organisation and everybody's got what they need. We'd always really encourage you to keep an eye on your top talent and your key person dependencies in the organisation. There's a couple of reasons for this. The first is to, when it comes to talent, these are your talent and key person dependencies are the people who, if they leave your organisation, they're going to have kind of a disproportionate impact in your organisation. So if we've got a real key eye on talent, key person dependencies, again, you might even want to kind of, in 10 Space, we do what we call tagging. So we can identify people's key person dependencies and talent into a group that we're monitoring and measuring particular engagement on. But really understanding what is the impact on those populations and can we de-risk them where we can. So, you know, these people are human, they're going to be navigating the change just like everybody else. Is there people that we particularly need to be mindful of so that we don't lose them, so that we're de-risking them where we can? And that could, again, be through additional communication, additional support, additional training, whatever that looks like, in order to get those key talent and that key person dependencies re-engaged and de-risk them from leaving your organisation as you're going through change. But also, once you've done that, if you can crack that, they then also become additional change agents. So often key talent, key person dependencies are influential in your organisation, and you can use them then in order to strive through the change in the same way that you would leaders. They are influential to other people in the organisation. Other people are kind of looking at them for help and support and advice, and you can use them as change agents. So really kind of keeping an eye on that key person so that you're de-risking, but also that you're transforming those people into change agents and helping you facilitate the quicker change process. And really about kind of keeping checking and keeping communicating. So again, you know, if I think about some of the change processes that I've been through over time over in my career, sometimes I stop that change process too soon. And what I mean by that is, I'd have an amazing communication pack of a big change that was happening, and then, you know, we'd do a couple of check-ins and we'd just assume that everybody was getting on with it. And actually, the reality is, as per that change curve, people can take an awful lot longer than we would like, or we would anticipate, to complete a change process and get themselves back engaged in the organisation. So it's really important that we keep going until we're confident that we've rebuilt engagement. And again, we can do that. We can see that in the data if we want to track it that way. But really making sure that we're keeping informing people, we're keeping listening, we're keeping on taking action, and we're really keeping on going until we've rebuilt, until we're confident that engagement is rebuilt, and that we don't kind of tick, this change has been completed, until we're really confident that engagement's either rebuilt or we're in a better place than we were previously, and that we need to kind of keep going maybe through that change loop in order to make sure that that's happened. I wanted to, just before I kind of do a bit of a summary, I wanted to just say a bit of a key word about leavers. So this is kind of a word of warning really about some stuff that I've seen, again, when I'm doing change programs, particularly if people are likely to leave the organisation and restructure, or, redundancy process, or acquisitions, or whatever that looks like. I often think of the way that we treat leavers as kind of the ultimate test of culture in our organisation. And so I would really kind of encourage you to be really respectful about leavers if you are going through a change process. So anybody who, you know, the change just wasn't for them, or where they have you know, maybe they've been the one that's exited as a result of a restructure or a change. I've seen it where leaders in the organisation have been disrespectful about leavers, and that has really impacted on the culture on an ongoing basis of those people who've remained in the organisation. So I just thought it was worth kind of having in that final point, that final thought around, you know, being respectful about leavers, because that often the way that we treat leavers in organisations is the ultimate test of our culture, and it's that ongoing memory about how people might remember our organisation after we've left, and that can then impact on our employer branding, on our employee value proposition, and our kind of reputation in the employer marketplace, etc. So, you know, if you're going through change and people do end up leaving, be respectful. Make sure that you are engaging them right to the very last day. Okay, so key takeaways. So be aware of that engagement bank account and really thinking about putting more in than you're taking out. Really thinking about prioritising psychological safety and using that as the first step. Your key goal is to build up that psychological safety and trust back into your teams. Focusing on your leaders, making sure that they're engaged and you're using them to rebuild engagement on a mass scale, and to use them as change agents. Resetting your goals and your direction and your values, and making sure that the employees really understand where you're going, and what the future looks like for them. Using data to rebuild the teams, making sure that you are absolutely up to date on what's happening on those teams that need more support than others, where they're up to on the change curve, and what impact the change is having on them on an ongoing basis. Keeping an eye on your talent, making sure that you are taking the actions to de-risk them, but you are also using them as ultimate change agents if you need to. Keep communicating, keep checking in with people, and keep going until you're confident that change has happened effectively. Be respectful of leaders, and yeah, keep going until you've recovered and you've rebuilt engagement. So that was like a whistle-stop tour of change management and employee engagement. I really hope that it was helpful. If you want to keep in touch, that's my email address. I think my LinkedIn profile has probably gone in the comments. I'm super easy to find on LinkedIn anyway. That's our website if you want to go and check out some of the work that we do. You can also find me talking on HR Directors podcast about change and engagement and a load of other topics. So if there's anything, if you want to keep in touch, I'd love that. If there's any, I will check the questions now. If there's any questions that I can answer on call, I will stay on for a little bit. Or if you want to get in touch with me and kind of talk through change, or you think there's anything that we can help you with, then I'd be delighted to hear from you. So someone said, love the message about leavers. It's a critically important part of the process to ensure we provide good onboarding and outboarding experiences. They could be the future talent and could impact employer brands. Do you have any suggestions for good outboarding? Yeah, really good question. I think there's definitely kind of a cultural and a supportive piece that we can wrap around leavers. I mean, you know, I think it's a lot of it. Good outboarding is based on really supporting employees and sending them off with our blessing, really, and making sure that they feel like they have had you know, a fantastic experience as they are leaving the organisation. Now, I've got a theory that we should never have a leaver that we're surprised about, and if we've gone through a change process, we're likely not surprised about people leaving, or they've got a personal experience about why they're leaving, or we've come to the end of their career path here, and again, it shouldn't be a surprise that they're leaving. And I think what we can do is send people off with a blessing. You know, we can keep in touch with them, we can encourage them to keep in touch with their network. We can share with other people where they're going, not afraid of where they're going, for example, but really kind of making sure that we're supporting and engaging people right until the end. And what that does is that means that as they leave their organisation and people are asking them, oh, you used to work there, how did it go, and what do you think, that they're more likely to be passing on really great experience, and that really builds our employee engagement and employee branding even after somebody's left the organisation. And things like just little things can really matter, like how you take their equipment back from them, or getting their final payroll right. So some of it is in the detail, and some of it is just in that respect and how leaders treat them as they leave the organisation.